Welcome to Leading with Purpose, the podcast that's dedicated to helping you become the leader you aspire to be. Join us on a journey of self-discovery, empowerment, and inspiration as we explore the world of leadership and personal growth. In each episode, we will explore the art and science of effective leadership, bringing you insights, stories, and strategies from experts and thought leaders across various industries. And now your hosts, Dawn Marie Bornhammer, Maisha B. Hoy, Janelle E. Taylor, and Dr. Sharon H. Porter. Welcome to Leading with Purpose, the podcast that's dedicated to helping you become the leader you aspire to be as you lead, empower, inspire, and achieve. I am Dr. Sharon H. Porter, Editor-in-Chief of Vision and Purpose Lifestyle Magazine.
Hi, I'm Janelle Taylor and CEO of Jator Corporation, where we optimize people performance and products.
Hi, everyone. I'm Maisha Hoy, CEO of BSHG LLC.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dawn Bornhammer, and I am the founder and chief impact leader of Mission Inspired Consulting.
And we are super excited to welcome our guest for today, Mr. David J. Albritton. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
So excited. David is a managing director at CRA Admired Leadership. This is a leadership development and strategic communication consultancy. He is an International Coaching Federation accredited executive coach, as well as an award-winning business leader, public company board director, public speaker, and public relations communications expert with more than 35 years of leadership experience across the corporate, nonprofit, and military sectors. That is a mouthful, Mr. David Albritton. And I love it. But you know what? I gave all those wonderful titles, all those things that you are doing and have done. But if you would, please just take this time to share a little about your background or something that I did not cover.
Well, thank you very much, ladies, for the invitation tonight. It's very exciting to be here. Very honored to talk to you this evening. I think by way of background, I'm originally from Philadelphia. Go Eagles. Always wherever I'm at. I reside in the Washington, D.C. area for the last 21 years. I went to U.S. Naval Academy here in this area. Did 10 years as an officer in the Navy before transitioning in 1998 to my corporate career. And I had a wonderful, wonderful career, a lot of great opportunities, met a lot of people, worked for tremendous leaders, worked with teams that were just phenomenal. And all of that, combined, I think was a huge factor in the success that I enjoyed. So when I look back, I thank each and every one of them, particularly if you're watching this podcast tonight.
Thank you. And just for, disclaimer, I've known David for years now, but I am excited to talk to him tonight because I have seen him excel in many, many, many different positions over the last years. So talk to us. I mean, you just said you've had a career in the Navy, in the Army, in the military, you've run companies. What are some of the challenges that you face today when you're looking at talking to different leaders as they're coming up?
Well, the biggest change, I think, is one of recent creation after COVID. I mean, this crescendo was building for years, but after COVID, it changed the whole working environment. And the expectation from what I've seen for how people lead, how they engage, what they expect is all changed. The generations that have come after me, expect something totally different than I did when I was a 22-year-old coming out of college. And so me as a leader, anybody about my age, late 50s, who's leading a younger generation of folks, have a different way that they have to engage, have to understand what their needs are, and hopefully changing their leadership style so that they can be most effective in engaging in the most appropriate ways. But the same thing is true with the advent of technology and everything that we utilize today, from our tablets, from our telephones, to computing, to doing this podcast, if you will, using, wireless technology. We can be anywhere we want to be around the world at any given time. And that changes the engagement model from what it used to be when everybody was just in the office and seeing everybody and standing around the water cooler and able to go to lunch together and all those types of things. As relates to leadership, when you don't engage with somebody and you see them every day, and that's what you've grown up in, in that environment, from a leadership perspective, hopefully you've changed. You've understood that you've got to migrate your style. You've got to understand that, the world you grew up in, had fixed working hours. I went to the office from 8 to 5 and that was it. But now people work all times of the day, wherever they are. And, if you have different expectations, perhaps you don't resonate with that. I can go on, but I think just, the modern way of work has changed and, evolved forever. And that's a huge adjustment for leaders that we have to consider going forward.
So are you finding different challenges from the executive level and the people you're working with? Is it more international? Because you said you were an international coach.
Well, I mean, there's always, if you think about an international type of environment, different cultures, different expectations, even in the same company. I've had clients that were international companies, and I've talked to the employees of the same company, of the same brand, who had different understandings of what the overarching strategic premise of the company was. Because if you consider that all politics is local, even under the same umbrella of the company, everything is different in Korea than it is in China, than it is in Sao Paulo, than it is in Mexico, than it is, here in the United States. And so the cultures are different, the leadership styles are different, the expectations of the employees are different. And you as a leader have to become very adept at understanding the needs of the folks that you're working with in a 360-degree sphere of influence.
Well, David, those are really great responses. You mentioned a lot about evolving and impacting in your journey. So you're serving on a company board at the moment. So in your leadership role, since you mentioned migration, how does your leadership style differ in an advisory role compared to an executive role?
Yeah, it's been a huge change. It's been a migration path that I've actually been on. Actually took an external course so that I could understand the nuance of being a board director, particularly for a public company. I think the easiest way to describe it is a simple term that resonates with me strongly. My role as a board director is nose in, fingers out. When I was an operator, when I was inside a company and worrying about the P&L and worrying about the day-to-day operations inside that organization, that was my role. That was my responsibility. As a board member, that's not my job. They have a wonderful executive team that's worried about the day-to-day operations of that company. My responsibility is totally different. My loyalty and my responsibility, even though I like them very much inside the company, my number one responsibility as a public company board director is to the shareholders, right? I have a legal fiduciary responsibility to the shareholder who entrusts me to make good decisions, to listen well, to pay attention to all the signals, to understand the core strategy of the organization, the investment thesis, the management structure, the reporting to Wall Street, all of these disparate types of responsibilities, and really staying on top of those things, on a quarterly basis when we meet, but in between time too, because with companies, they're very dynamic and there's always something going on. So engaging with the CEO and the management team as needed to clearly understand their command intent, where they're going, where they want to go, and just being along on that ride, but from a very different perspective than a badge-wearing employee of the company.
Definitely a different perspective. And just really quickly, what unique challenges, because those are different roles, are there different opportunities and challenges in that role versus an executive board member?
You've got to learn how to really listen intently and understand, the direction and the intent of the leadership team. You've got to understand somewhat about the competitive environment, the market conditions, and all those things. You've got to learn how to trust people, because I can only operate on the information that I get from the management team. And in instances where they're really going through deep financial, reviews, or they're talking again about their investment thesis and those types of things, I'm not inside that company every day, so I can't really ascertain necessarily, from a deep level, about all the X's and O's, and everything that's going on a daily basis. So when I do have presentations, presented to me, and I've done my homework before the board meeting, my job is to ask very good questions, is to listen well, understand, accept what I'm hearing, but then, come away with a clear understanding that, the management team is managing this company well, so that the shareholders are going to get what they deserve as investors in this organization.
Outstanding. Thank you, David. It's awesome. Awesome responsive.
All right, David, I would love to talk a little bit about change leadership, if
Sure.
you will. So recognizing that inside the military and in corporate America, we're all ever evolving and changing, right? Change leadership looks a little different sometimes, but I was in a dinner conversation the other night about just how much synergy there really is between those two environments and those that are desiring to be more than just managers, but to genuinely lead their people. And when change comes, what strategies would you recommend to leaders inside of either or both environments that'll help move their people forward and ideally collectively move forward with whatever the shift and change is that they're presented with?
Yeah, absolutely. As a leader, you've got to pay attention to, how somebody else other than you is looking at the situation. I'll use a couple of examples from my own professional experience. Let's say you're in a corporation that's going through transformational change. Let's say there's some M&A activity. You're you're acquiring another company, and there's going to be more employees, and there's going to be competition, or you're divesting a section of the company, and you're in that that part of the company that's going to be divested. You have uncertainty about what your future is because it's been announced that there's going to be 2,000 layoffs or those types of things as they consolidate, some of their cost structure. Well, I've been on the bottom end of that pole where, I was at Compaq Computer Corporation in the early 2000s when it was announced that Hewlett Packard was acquiring us. I had just moved from Chicago to Houston a year prior to that. My wife was pregnant with our youngest son at the time. And here it was announced that 15,000 layoffs are going to happen as a result of this merger. I didn't know if I was going to have a job, if I was going to be able to pay my mortgage, all these things. So I internalized that announcement much differently than I did years later when I was a senior executive at a company, like when I was at ITT Defense 2011, when ITT decided that it was going to break into 3 public companies. And the business that I was working for, ITT Defense, was going to spin off to become a publicly traded company called Excelis. Well, my financial situation and everything else in my life was different by then. So the fear internally for me, from a financial perspective and otherwise, whether or not I had a job or not, I knew that my family was going to be okay. So there's 2 ends of that spectrum that you have to consider as a leader on how people are going to receive the news for change. The thing that happens all the time is we don't recognize that change happens every day. We go through and experience change as a just normal course of our daily lives. Everybody deals with change differently. And your job as a leader is to understand enough about your folk so that you resonate with how they're internalizing change and then how you can best lead them through that. Because, really, if you're thinking about transformational change inside of an organization, there's 2 ends of the spectrum, right? There's the awareness side of it, and then there's, all the way down to the action. Because in between, people have to be aware, okay, now they got to understand, what that means for them. Then they got to understand the why. And then they got to somehow accept that and, be understanding beyond of, just the basics and saying, okay, this is a good decision, bad decision, but I've got to live with it. And then they got, if they're going to remain inside that organization, they also have to commit to this change and then start living it. And that's where the action comes in. There's a whole spectrum of behaviors, of emotions and all kinds of things, throughout that landscape. And your job as a leader is to make sure that everybody clearly understands, what the direction is, how they are going to be part of this future, and then what they can do individually to be part of the broader team that's going to make this change successful. That's kind of how I look at it, and that's how I advise and counsel my coaching clients as well.
I think you made a couple of really good distinctions, right? We have to create this space for people to feel heard, but also not leave them sitting in it too long and move them towards being a part of the new, right? And
Absolutely.
Recognizing that there's space for a benefit of psychological safety at some point, right? They feel like you are going to lead them through this next season and allow them to be a part of that and then see their value inside of it. And so being able to communicate that with confidence allows them to hopefully feel less afraid and more on board with the next season. And then they get to decide how they're going to respond in that moment. And that's where you see character come through as well. So
Great
thank you so
explanation.
much for that, David.
No, thank you.
So, David, we know that effectiveness and evaluating effectiveness really is the golden nugget, right? How do you measure success of your leadership efforts, and what metrics do you use to define that success?
I don't know that I have hard metrics because that can be nuanced. I think the golden nugget for understanding how people are feeling and how you can ascertain whether or not you're doing a good job or not is feedback. Feedback is a true gift, right? And if you go seek feedback, then hopefully you'll get the answers that you need to make better, smarter decisions about how you're impacting the world around you. A lot of times as individuals, we shy away from feedback because that's, we want to hear the attaboys, but we don't want to hear about the all shuckses. Okay. Just to, simplify that term. Human nature is not one that says, hey, we want to show up and talk about how bad I was in a particular situation. That's not a good feeling for anybody. I don't care what your educational background is, how successful you've been in your organization, whatever that is. But if you change your psyche, if you change your understanding and you accept the fact that you are not infallible and we all have the opportunity 100% of the time to get better at what we do, then you'll listen and you'll seek out that feedback so that you can get better. As a leader, I want to have somebody that's standing in front of me and is not afraid to tell me that I have mustard on my shirt, right? Because otherwise I'm walking around with mustard on my shirt and that's not a good thing for anybody, okay? But if I've got to create the environment as a leader to make them comfortable with coming to tell me that I've got that mustard on my shirt. If I'm a person that receives bad news and I shoot the messenger on a daily basis, that person is not going to feel confident and comfortable to come to me and have that conversation. I am, as a leader, am then left vulnerable because I'm not going to have all the context that I need to continue to be successful. And I might go on to continue that bad behavior in a different context, which is going to come back and bite me in and you know what. And so, that feedback is a critical loop that is essential for me to continue to grow and get better as a leader. But again, as a leader, I got to create that environment to allow people to feel comfortable to be able to give me that feedback.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
So, of course, I just noticed that you have a new background, CRA Admired. I've listened to you talk about trust, communications, feedback, but give us some more information or tell me how you went from, I can't remember all the companies you've worked for, but how you've landed at Admired Leadership and why is it called Admired Leadership? What's the
thank you for that.
mission of this
So
assignment?
just a little historical reference, I had a long corporate career that up until about 3 years ago, I had been the vice president of communications at Amazon Web Services. I'd only been in that job for about 3.5 months. Prior to that, I'd been at General Motors as the president of General Motors Defense. So the career was going great. Was in a great spot. And then life happened and hit me in the gut in a way that it had never done before. My oldest daughter got diagnosed with a form of leukemia. And thankfully, we're blessed that she's in remission now and everything's great. She's living her best life. Great mom, great job, great, just great everything. But at the time, it's pretty dicey. So a leave of absence turned into a full resignation so that I could have flexibility. Both of my daughters live just north of Philly. I live in the DC area, up and down the road, uncertainty, all of that. If I needed to be somewhere at any time, I wanted to be able to go do that. And in a global communications job, I just didn't have that flexibility, and I couldn't do both. So I left and then ended up, a few months later, just deciding that, I had done even more than I'd ever anticipated in my corporate career. I'd gotten out of the Navy in 1998. My goal when I got out was to emulate a phenomenal leader of one of mine, the first boss I ever had. His name's Ron Culp. He was the chief communications officer at Sears Roebuck Company back in 98. And my goal when I got out of the Navy in my corporate roles was I want to be a chief communications officer one day. Well, fast forward 13 years later, I became the chief communications officer at Excelis when we spun off from ITT Defense. Check the box. It's done. I felt at that time I don't need to climb any higher than that. And then life changes. Excelis gets acquired by Harris and the company goes away. Well, ended up thankfully at General Motors. The current president there at GM brought me into the company. I ran all global communications outside the U.S. And then he and the leadership team promoted me about 3.5 years later, became the president of General Motors Defense, which is a role I never asked for, never anticipated, didn't ever think that anybody would think about me, to run a P&L inside of a Fortune 25 company, but they did it. So I greatly exceeded my goal for my career. And it was about that time that maybe soon after I was starting to begin the interview process or be considered for the board of directors that I sit on at Embecta Corporation, which is a $1.1 billion diabetes care business that spun off from Becton Dickinson about 2 years ago. And so all of that happened in my life and career. And it was like, why go back to corporate? You've done more than you ever expected. Now go off and start that company that you've had in the back of your head for 10 years and go make it happen. So I spun off and on my own. And I started a company called 1988 Strategies, 1988 being the year I graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy. And so it started as a PR consulting business that morphed into an executive coaching business, because one of the things I've always loved is mentoring and helping people get ahead. And then once I expanded into my network, came across some coaches, realized that if I could coach, I never have to retire because I can get paid to do the thing I love the most. And so I ended up going to Georgetown University's coaching program, ended up getting accredited by the International Coaching Federation. So, for the last 2+ years, I've been full-time coaching. Loving that. Running 1988 Strategies, things were going well, with the company. But then I came across, or they found me, CRA Admired Leadership. It's a boutique consultancy based outside of Philly that's both strategic communications and leadership development, executive coaching, etc. Having worked in communications for 30 years plus, seemed great. And now as a leadership coach, it seemed greater. And then I got to engage with them, and I was just blown away by the quality of the coaches, the quality of the materials. They served more than 30 of the Fortune 100. It was just a very unique fit for me. And so it was kind of a natural migration into the company. And I've been there now 2 months. And I am just overjoyed with the choice. I really have an opportunity to scale my coaching opportunities in terms of the companies and the individuals I get in front of. I get to work with some phenomenal, colleagues here. And because, I did work in the communications world for so long, I have opportunities to still kind of keep this noggin, active and doing strategic communications work. So all around, it just seemed like a great fit for me.
Well, congratulations on the new position. I don't feel bad that I can never keep track of your career because it's been crazy over the last few years. But congratulations.
Absolutely. Congratulations. Thank you.
That is so admirable. David, you seem like a bullet train that cannot be stopped. So I'm not going to talk about resiliency. You check the box. I'm not going to talk about the impacts that you made. What I want to ask is for the listeners who are aspiring leaders, they can't walk in your shoes. You got some big shoes to fill, but can you give a final piece of advice on what you would give them based on your experiences? And I'm still stuck with that question about change. Change does feel different at different stages in your life. Yeah. Can you please give us some aspect of your journey from the Navy to the corporate world and now as a coach? What can you leave us with top of mind tonight?
From a leadership perspective, what I encourage people to do is never stop changing, never stop growing, never stop becoming the best version of yourself. That's going to change and morph over time. I encourage people all the time, don't look at tomorrow or next week. Start thinking about who you want to be 20, 30, 40 years from now. I've got a son who's about to graduate from Elon University here in 2 months. He's 22 years old. If he works till he's 62, he's got 40 years to work, right? I tell him all the time, if you don't start thinking about how you want to live when you are my age, you're going to make tactical decisions that aren't necessarily going to have the best strategic impact for you in longer term. So if you can think about what that North Star is and then make, smart strategic decisions between now and then, the outcomes will be much better because you'll accept or maybe not accept those things that aren't right for you because you've done the strategic analyses, you talk to the right people, the mentors, the coaches, the sponsors and others who are going to be along your journey. But along that path, there's so much you've got to do, right? I mean, particularly as you become a leader, right? The thing, I think is the undercurrent to all leadership is that you have to recognize first, leadership is a privilege, right? Not everybody gets to lead people or engage with people. Now, people sometimes confuse leadership and management. Management is a function of HR. You got a title, you're getting a paycheck, and now you got 5 people working for you. That's a manager. You get assigned that. But just because you have title does not mean you know, and does not mean you are a leader. That's a learned behavior that you're going to have to really develop a kindred spirit with these folks so that they are going to follow you and do those things that perhaps they don't want to do with a smile on their face. I mean, that's what one of my old Navy chiefs used to tell me on the ship I was on. So when you think about that from that perspective, it gives you a good overarching construct for you to start operating from. And then allows you to kind of understand your landscape, put your people first, really start listening more than you speak. All right. We tend, as sometimes, and I'm very guilty of this myself in my history, I am on transmit all the time. I know more, I've done more, and so I'm going to give you everything I know to show you how smart I am. Okay. Whereas I probably should have been listening more to understand the context for how people are engaging, what they know, what they don't understand, these types of things, so I can make better, more informed decisions based on that feedback, that input. Many times, my ability to delegate and move things off of my plate and give it to somebody who's probably better at me at doing these things, regardless of my title, my numbers of years experience, that's a better thing. And so these are things that we need to recognize as leaders going forward. And I think to get off the stage on that topic, I think, the most important thing that we can do is we can never say thank you enough, right? Sometimes that's all people are looking for. That simple recognition. I know a lot of companies have these recognition systems, and you can give points and they can buy vests and coffee mugs and all these types of things. And that's great recognition. But sometimes Joe Jones, Sally Smith, all they really want is a thank you. And if you can recognize that and then give praise when it's due at the form that they truly expect, that's the best currency that you can provide for some folks just based upon, their work ethic and how much time and energy and effort they put into something. That special thank you is a lot of times the thing that they're really wanting. So as a leader, always remember that.
Outstanding. I feel like I've been coached. And again, I love the plan for the long range. Plan for the long range. The short and snappies are great, but I love that perspective on the path. Please, thank you. It goes a long way. And one of my favorite quotes, David, is your title is temporary, and your character, it lasts longer, so it carries more weight. And that's a really good thought for beginning leaders, those who've been in the game for a long time. So that's really awesome advice. Thank you.
I had an old HR leader give me a nuance on that. Titles are free, right? Titles are given to you. You can, I joke with people all the time. You can call me Vice President XYZ, but you can call me Grand Poobah if you want to. But what do you resonate with me as it relates to me leading you through this challenge in this organization, et cetera? Do you respect me? Are you going to show up and give me your best effort because you want to? Or have I pressed you down so much and not given you enough information or not trusted you enough, or all these things that are going to, subvert your ability to be successful? Sometimes we, inadvertently do those things as leaders, and we're not getting the best out of our people. So it has nothing absolutely to do with your title. And in fact, a leader can be 3 levels down, right? Just depends on their expertise, their education, their willingness to engage. And it's, as a leader, sometimes I got to look left or look down or look, in another direction, up or what, whatever, to pull the best leader for the particular circumstance that we're in. A lot of times it's not me. And when I can turn my psyche off and get my ego out of the way, it's better for the team when we're able to do that.
Absolutely. And at every level, it is always, in fact, every time a privilege. Thank you so much, David.
Absolutely.
Just when I thought I had my next thing, you said something else that was golden. So thank you for all of that. Be a leader that you would follow, right, is kind of the essence of what I was hearing from you. And when I think about clear and thoughtful communication, I think about intention versus impact. And so I would love your thoughts on effective communication as it relates to leadership, building off of what you've already shared, but the idea of really speaking to people in a way in which they are prepared to receive it, whether that be the accolades and acknowledgement, that appreciation, or delivering the feedback that they need to hear in order to have the opportunity to grow.
Yeah. I think, the one word I would describe for just, effective communications is authenticity. They've got to believe exactly what you're saying. You've got to show up. Your ethics have to be pinpoint, their trust and confidence in you and your way, ability to authentically communicate with them so that they build that trust and will do what you ask them to do. That there is no substitute for that. Okay. A lot of times though, we also have to think about the channels for how we're communicating, and are we utilizing the right channel at the right time with the right information to keep people informed, right? A lot of times, particularly now that we all are on phones all day, we're on tablets, we're on computers, we sent an email or we've sent a text, and then we make the wrong assumption that we have communicated. Well, that doesn't mean a message sent does not mean it's necessarily a message received. And so when you make the assumption that you've communicated, but the receiver has not received it at all, not seen it, well, you've got a communications challenge there. Or if the message that you've sent was taken out of context because of language or, lack of intent or whatever that is, that too creates, an issue downrange that you're going to have to think about. Okay. Because you have to consider how they're receiving it, what they're receiving, what your intention is, and what you want them to walk away with so that they can use that information to best effect. A lot of times, again, this goes back to me talking about being on transmit all the time. I'll say this over and over, just say less. Learn how to develop deep listening skills with everything, in your 360-degree sphere of influence so that you can, absorb the right information, make smart and strategic decisions, and then utilize that information to get it out to all the key stakeholders that you need to. If it's a really tough topic, get off of email, right? Get out, talk to somebody, whether that's a phone conversation, a Zoom call, Teams, whatever that is. The context of some of those conversations on tough and challenging issues, it's not right to just communicate through email, particularly if you felt a certain way by something you've received. That old count to 10 rule is very much in effect, right? You go into something with emotion and you blast it because you feel you're right in that second when all the adrenaline's flowing, and you might have bad, outcomes because of you used emotion rather than, rational thinking to kind of get where you're going. And then, that's just a recipe for a bad decision down the road. You should also think about, from an effective communications perspective, now, when you receive information and somebody was intending to give you something and you've not responded, whether or not you chose to not respond on purpose or you just missed it or whatever, if it's perceived that you've missed it or you've chosen not to respond, well, here's what happens. In the absence of information, people start filling that void with their own narrative. Okay. And that can be, cause of rumors, of innuendo, and of bad things that happen, in the broader ecosystem that you then can't control because it spiraled, beyond your control. So you got to think about the fact that your choice not to respond in certain instances is telling somebody loudly how you're actually feeling about something. So your intention to not communicate is actually loudly communicating.
No, thank you, David. And I think that goes back to a principle that I refer to as self-leadership, right? You have to recognize how you are leading yourself in certain instances and what your personal brand is as a result of how you choose to respond. And so there is an element of restraint and there's an element of professionalism. And then there's just an element of finding the best method and way to communicate so that you and the other person or the group can receive the best outcomes and move forward together. So thank you for that perspective.
And David, we want to say thank you. Thank you for just sharing all of your knowledge, your expertise. This has been such an impactful dialogue, and we would like to give you this space to share your contact information where people can connect with you and reach out to you if necessary.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. It's been lovely talking to you, ladies. I really appreciate your platform. I wish you the best with it going forward, but it has truly been an honor. I think the best way to connect with me is on LinkedIn. I believe in that platform. I, truly use LinkedIn, on a regular basis. My tag on, LinkedIn, I don't know what to call it, but it's David Albritton together. So DavidAlbritton. Please look me up. Let's connect. And if I can ever be helpful, let me know.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I want to thank you for joining us on Leading with Purpose podcast today. It has been a pleasure. I am Dr. Sharon H. Porter.
I am Aisha B. Hoy.
I am Janelle Taylor.
And I am Dawn Bornheimer. As you navigate your leadership journey, remember that leading with purpose is not just a philosophy, but it is a commitment to an impactful growth.
And if you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with your network. And don't forget to subscribe so you will never miss an opportunity to explore the intersection of leadership and purpose.
Continue to lead, empower, inspire, and achieve.
And until next time, lead with passion, lead with a positive intention, and by all means, continue to lead with purpose. Thank you for joining the Leading with Purpose podcast. Please join us every Monday for a new episode.